Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg, and this is It's Okay to Be Old, a show about all things aging well. Well, my guest today is Lindsay Friedman, and she's the founder of LTCare Nav and Care Bloom, helping caregivers and families make smart long-term care decisions for aging parents. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much for having me, Patricia.
Well, let's start out by telling us how you got into this as a business.
So I actually started working in the care space when I was 18 years old. So many, many moons ago, I started as an STNA, working through nursing homes, assisted living, hospice, while I was getting a business degree. And I was actually going to go right into nursing school and tried it. And a lot of the stuff that nurses do is I give them a lot of credit. It's gross, sort of. Like I'm not good with blood. I got a queasy stomach, so I didn't make it through, which was really disheartening to me because I wanted to serve an elder care community and realized that wasn't going to happen and stayed with hospice for a really long time while I pursued a career in technology. And years later, I became my grandma's caregiver and saw that there is a world of difference between being a professional caregiver, which has its own set of challenges, to becoming a family caregiver, which if you're one of the 63 million caregivers out there right now, you know that there are more challenges than you can imagine. It's just not the care. You become a chauffeur and an accountant, and you're managing so much. And part of my time was actually managing some home health care at night. We had some issues, and my issues that I saw is actually what caused me to create Care Bloom. And I started with Care Bloom first. We did that. It came out 2017. And it was really it was what I needed. I needed to be able to keep an eye on just my grandma, not to see how she's doing moving around, but also if you have help in the home, what are they doing? Because you're not just paying for a helping hand, you're paying for the wellness of your loved ones. And if they aren't doing what they're supposed to do, things can get bad. So I started with that. And then through the years of actually installing Care Bloom, because as a founder, you wear lots of hats, and I was an installer, I was talking to families and I had become a certified senior care advisor and learned so much about what they were going through. And care is just one piece of it. And what I learned was that families really don't understand what the care process looks like, what is out there to help them, who's going to help them, what it's going to cost, what options there are to pay for it. So that's why I created LT Care Nav, is to have a one-stop shop for families to go and get answers to all of their questions as it comes to long-term care and meet all of the right people. So that was that, and that's my journey to the two
Wow.
companies.
Yeah. And that's the important thing that you have firsthand experience. I do too with both my parents and my mother-in-law. My parents, we had help in the house, but there was always something going on. And my mother-in-law lived in the house with me. So that was an interesting journey. And the emotional exhaustion in itself will kill the caretaker. And I'm not the caregiver. And I'm not trying to be dramatic. So that's precisely why I asked you on the show, because now more than ever, we're so painfully aware of how all consuming caregiving of older adults is for everybody. We worry about the care, but the people doing it, like you say, do they even know what they're doing? Are they exhausting themselves and getting sick, and they're not even really caring for the individual in the way that they need it? I want to ask you about statistics for a minute. So, most people want to keep their parent home because of money. They don't know any better. The parent refuses to leave. What are usually the circumstances? I'm very pro facility if it's the right facility because it helps everybody. I mean, there's no right answer. I think it's very individual, but what do you see mostly?
So I think there is this stigma that comes with facility, and I think that word even throws stigma
Yes.
around it, and I use it too.
Yeah.
I think most older adults picture nursing home when you think of community, right? When you say assisted living memory care, they're thinking of the nursing home where there's four people in a room and nobody's getting tended to and they're left in bed all days. But nursing homes, these like SNFs as they call them, these skilled nursing facilities, are really at a higher level of care. If you're there, that's where you need to be.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, unfortunately, because that means most likely somebody can't take care of you at home. The communities that you're talking about, I'm very pro community as well. I already have my assisted living picked out if something happens.
Okay.
They're great. They're a lifestyle. And that's where I think there's just a misconception. One, it gives the older adult the ability to be social and to have a life that is not completely dependent on a child. And it becomes your home. So you still are aging in place at assisted living. You just have care that's there around the clock that is making sure you're taking your medicines and getting your food and being safe. Um, and so I'm a proponent of it as well. But I think that stigma comes from don't ever put me in a home, don't lock me away. And that is not what our assisted livings of today look like.
Everybody pictures One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? Nobody says, oh, maybe there's, and then they name them these corny names and all that. But the truth is, you're not going to languish. It's a whole different ball game now. Lindsay, we have this image of parents taking care of their children, and then in turn, the children will take care of their parents. Unfortunately, the type of care is completely different and it affects us differently. Can you speak to how shocking it is for the adult children when they find out what it really takes to care for an aging parent?
Yes. I think that whole assumption of like, I took care of you, you take care of me thing is really hard to put on your adult child
Mm.
because it's a different level of care. And that's why people, when they talk to me about, oh, I feel like I'm parenting my parent. No, you're not. Parenting and being a caregiver are two totally different things. We are raising our children, we're helping for them. When you become a caregiver, it's a very different level of when you're showering and bathing an adult, it's very different than a baby,
Mm.
right? We grow out of showering and bathing our children at a very young age because they become self-sufficient. So even the tasks, moving a baby is very different than transferring somebody who's older. In some cases, transferring with just one person there becomes unsafe. And when you're working with another adult, you need to make sure that you, as the caregiver, are safe first. Because remember, if you drop them, you're going to probably get hurt in that process also, and then you have no one to help. So I think that's one of the big things is physical care is very demanding, and you're caring for somebody who is most likely similar in size to you.
And there's also the emotional is that you're yelling at each other or you're fighting old battles, of control, because we all know that you kind of become a teenager around your parents again, and you become the rebellious teenager, and you just want to sit and do what you want to do. And then the pain of seeing a helpless parent, it's tragic. It's um, I wish we had a school for this going in or a training where you could get this at a younger age because Lindsay, part two of what we're always talking about here is getting these plans in place way ahead of when you need them, not on the fly, to the point where I tell my siblings, and they always laugh at me. My mother, when they retired, moved to Arizona, got a 1-story house, and they handicapped the whole house. So, in other words, it didn't look like it because it was gorgeous terracotta colors and desert landscape, but they made wide doorways, a shower that you could roll in. The dining room, they took the doors down and made one of those extra wide. She didn't go and measure wheelchairs, she just made it very, very accessible and needed it later. And thank God. And then when she passed away 4 years before my father, he benefited tremendously because we could have somebody stay overnight in the house with him, but the doors and the access to where he needed to be when he ended up in a wheelchair, the counters were a little bit lower. I mean, everything about it was amazing. And, it's unheard of. I'd like to do that now. I tell my husband that. My brothers and sisters always like, well, if he needs a wheelchair or crutches, we'll get them when we need them. And I'm like, no, I think you need to equip it way ahead of time. And if you never need it, thank God you never need it. It's fine. But we need to talk about planning ahead with everything, right?
Especially when we talk about aging in place.
Yeah.
Like what your parents did is how you can age in place. But what you don't realize is most of the people who are living in their forever home that they've been in since they were in their 40s, you're not equipping that in most cases. You need to know that you have one floor straight walk in from garage all the way through your living space, everything, your laundry room with wide doorways and not a bathtub. There are really things that need to be in place when we talk about aging in place that doesn't apply to most of the homes that we are purchasing when we have young children. And that is a decision when you talk about it again. You have these conversations as soon as you see it coming, as soon as you get close to that about like, what is this going to look like?
Hmm.
And when we talk about that, like I'm in my late 40s and my husband and I have talked about what does this look like for us? He doesn't want to talk about it with me as much, but he knows he has no choice because it's what I do all day and I'm not going to stop.
Right.
But it is. So that'll just show you how hard it is for families to have the conversation. Is like, even I have a hard time pulling my husband into it, but I'm like, this is not going to be the house we can stay in. We can't stay here. So, what does that look like? And when does that time come? Because you also don't want to be moving after that time has come and now it's a hard transition.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Also, I think there's a very profound feeling of loss when you move out of a house. And even if you want to move and you know it's the right thing, it's been your home for so long, and your memory is dramatically affected. As we know, people who get older and develop memory loss remember 50 years ago and 40 years ago, but they don't necessarily remember 5 years ago or 2 years ago or what they ate for breakfast. And so their new environment becomes very foreign to them. And I think that the earlier you do it, the more acclimated someone would become. Yeah, I feel like what are we going to do with all these Cape Cods and spiral staircases and homes with nooks and crannies as our population ages? We're going to have to rip all these out and make them accessible. Um,
I still go with, there are now these beautiful communities that go from like independent living to assisted living, and usually they can stay in the same apartment up to memory care. And if you can see this is going to be part of your process, getting into a place where you can be comfortable and do that transition, the entire like continuum, I think is really helpful, especially in those like memory care diagnosis kind of situations where you can get them acclimated well. They can still be adjusted and know where they are.
so that's an interesting point. Is there a minimum age that they can move into these facilities? I'm sorry, communities. Let's not use the
Yeah.
word
So
facility.
I think it depends. I think some of them are like 55 and
Oh,
older
okay.
communities. So there are those. We have a beautiful one here in Cleveland that does start at 55 and you can get a condo on the property and then just kind of move your way up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then some of the other ones I think you would have to see what state law looks like and what it looks like to be there. But I think sooner rather than later, some of these things, or really having a good age in place plan. It gets expensive.
Right.
And as somebody who's been a family caregiver, somebody who is helping my parents a little bit right now, we love to all the parents out there, we love you. We want to help. But I think one of the things when you rely on your children too much is what you end up seeing happening is your daughter becomes your caregiver. And that dynamic is going to change. And it's going to be hard on both of you. And there's going to be grief and loss for a primary relationship. So, always finding a way to make sure that your children don't have to be your primary caretakers, I think is just better for a family in general, if they can make that happen.
I know that it starts with spouses being together. Then one passes, the remaining spouse isn't up to the task. But then it takes an extreme health scare or an emergency before the kids or anyone else intervenes because the parent keeps saying, I'm fine, leave me alone. This is my house. I don't want to go. Or the spouses are still alive and together and they're playing off each other. We don't need to leave. We're both here. And we would always joke with my parents when they both became quite infirmed at the same time and at a fairly young age. My sister and I were like, well, we're paying for someone just to call 911 because they wouldn't let them do anything. In fact, after my mother passed away, my father was alone. He would fire them. and they'd leave, and then he'd be there all alone. And we're like, you don't work for him, you work for us. If he tells you to leave, don't listen to him. And go, well, what am I going to do? He told me to go home. So there's so many challenges with that also. So when we see sitting the parents down is a very difficult thing. Jamie Lee Curtis said this in an interview, and I loved it. She said, the most unique thing about being a parent is your job is to successfully bring your child up to where they no longer need you. And you launch them. It's the only job in the world, but you don't get to keep the fruits of your labor. They leave. That's the purpose. Then you're a successful parent is when they leave, is when your kids leave. And so that's always, that's the thing. I don't want to burden my kids. Well, you've been laying on the floor for 12 hours and you didn't call anyone. Well, I figured I could get up, or somebody would show up, or the mailman would come. I just hear these horror stories of these. So one of the things that I wanted do you see in your practice at all people roommating, or the room and board where they have 4 or 5 seniors in a house in bedrooms, and there's a central kitchen and caretaking setup?
Yeah, I've seen some of these care homes. We have a really lovely one here in town
Mm-hmm.
that's really nice. It has like bedrooms and it's communal living kind of thing. I think they're a great option if you are a more communal kind of person. They're usually very nice. The homes are usually very beautiful that they are in. I have even read articles about women, because women typically need to plan longer and plan for without being with their spouse at some point, typically. And I've even seen some older women who've kind of come together and like said, okay, we can find a house that we can age in place in, and we can help each other while we're still able to. And I think there's going to be some creative solutions coming up, because we aren't going to have the beds or the rooms to be able to accommodate everybody, or even the help, even if you want to stay at home and get care. And with so many more solo agers and children living across the country, I think more when it comes to women, I think we will see people finding their female tribe, their women friends, and saying, listen, I'm by myself, you're by yourself. What does this look like? Can we split costs? Can we be here for each other in case one or the other falls? And I think it's going to be a really beautiful way for people to kind of have a compromise.
The other thing we're seeing now is I don't know how prevalent it is across the country, but in cities is these NORC, where it's naturally occurring retirement communities where people live in apartment buildings. And then now the management of the apartment building, they're bringing in social workers, and they're bringing in services that you may not have the step up care that you would if you went to a community where you had first an apartment, then assisted living, then memory care. But they actually have a number for you to call if you're having a problem, and neighbors are looking out for each other. So all hope in humanity isn't lost. I think that's, and I love these, even if just an apartment building, that there's a community center with classes and speakers and exercise and ways for you to get out. Just that getting in the elevator, coming downstairs and seeing other people does wonders for your health. I mean, you and I know this. I can't emphasize that enough. That loneliness is lethal, right? I mean, it's just, we know this. And tell me about the solo aging movement. These are people who don't want to be in communal spaces.
Yeah, I think we saw sort of a shift where there with some of the people who are just starting to get a little older, where people didn't have children, right? They don't have a spouse anymore. And for me, those are the folks that I really want to make sure we have some situation in place, because they're the ones who might get lost in the shuffle a little bit. There's not somebody keeping an eye on them as they age. So I hope there are resources in the community that are going to step up
Right.
to really watch this, be it somebody at a doctor system, like a hospital system. Like if you are a doctor and you know that somebody is solo aging, what can you do with social workers to keep an eye on them? Because this is somebody who is not maybe getting a daily phone call to make sure they're not on the floor.
And this is just happened. My sister's neighbor lived alone. Nobody was looking out for him. And they noticed in the middle of the winter, the window was open. So they went, okay, maybe his heat on is so high, he opened up the window. And the next morning, the window was still sitting open. And they
Mhm.
called the security and they found him no longer living in his apartment. And nobody was looking out for him because he was alone. And, you hear it's terrible. Um, Lindsay, I know you work with people of all ages, genders, backgrounds to help with the services. What's the most requested? Is it the physical care? Is it the companionship or help with tasks? What do you find is most requested? Like, what's the starter? They need somebody to go food shopping or to.
Yeah, I think when it depends who's contacting, right? I think when it's somebody who's older who's taking that moment, it really is tasks around the house. That is the easiest thing to say, like, listen, I shouldn't be on a ladder anymore, right?
Right.
And I think that is where I see that seniors are more willing to reach out than saying, I think I need help with my medication.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I feel like the IADLs, like the instrumental kind of things that we do, the okay, I probably shouldn't be driving, or I need help carrying this. Those are where seniors feel more comfortable. Um, and typically they want their children to do it. Adult children, I think, wait too long
Mm-hmm.
to reach out because there is that mindset of, well, I have to do this now. And you start caring in a way that it's really about the time commitment, I think, is where we start to see the adult children of like, I just can't juggle this. I'm working a 40-hour week job. I've got kids, and now I have 40 hours a week to help my mom. That's, I think, real it is. So I don't necessarily think it's definitely like physical or financial. It's that time constraint. It's when it starts to roll over and you have no time left to give.
So let's right now tell the whole world that that is not selfish, that that
Yep.
is self-preservation, because you can't do it. You can't take care of your family, take care of your job, take care of yourself, and then add that full-time job on as a parent. Oh, I have a little aside that we didn't discuss in the pre-interview is can you be paid to be your own parent's caretaker? Can you apply to Medicare or Medi-Cal to actually be paid to do the caretaking within the family?
Yes.
Oh.
Now, yeah, so but there's very specific criteria around that, and it's very state specific.
Hmm.
There are some great companies. I think CareForth is one of them that has come up that can actually help you with the process. I mean, there are some really interesting organizations that are coming up to really help with this. Medicaid has it, Veterans Benefits. So, really understanding what your situation is, but it really comes down to like the person you're caring for, what do they have in place?
Right.
And understanding their situation. So, a lot of people who are saying, I don't want to talk about the financial stuff. Well, you need to. You need to understand what benefits are there to help make so you can be reimbursed when it comes to caregiving. And in some cases, it's probably not going to replace your full-time job. But if you're already putting the hours in to be able to do that, and there's some other creative ways where you can actually have your family member pay you as a caregiver different during through different programs. So really understanding what's available in your state and what your family member can qualify for, at least it gives you a nice buffer because caregiving is expensive.
That's the interesting thing is that there's if you go through an agency, the hourly rate is astronomical to pay somebody to come in and then to pay them directly. This is all about reliability and trust and so many issues that come up. Lindsay, that's the one thing that I really wanted to differentiate is that we have somebody from the outside coming in that they're not emotionless, but they're not attached. There's not the emotional attachment. There's so many unpleasant parts of this that for the family member. But I'd imagine even if you're not related, it's a hard job for somebody to be a caregiver, somebody who's a paid certified nursing assistant or whatever it might be. It's not easy for them either. But for the family member, you know, we talk about the toll that it takes on the mental well-being of caring for a parent or older relative.
So I think when it comes to being a professional caregiver, it's your job, right? And I think it comes more from lack of boundaries or respect. That's the hardest part I found with being a professional caregiver, because most people are there because it is really a beautiful thing to be able to help
Mm-hmm.
somebody,
Mm-hmm.
when you're being respected for doing so. Um, Families, it's one, this is most likely a person you love very deeply, who you want to have the best care they can possibly have and was taking care of themselves. And you know, when somebody chooses to take care of themselves, whether you agree with their lifestyle choices or not, that's how they're choosing to live, right? And we have to respect that. When somebody else goes in and we have this high expectation of making sure everything is perfect, one, that is hard. And then we're going to put that pressure on a caregiver. But also, I see a lot of it, it goes back to time constraints too. If you think about it right now, when you want to take a shower, I want to take a shower, you do it when you feel like it.
Right.
And you do it in a way that you want. And you take your merry old time, right? If you have the moments. It's very personal. All of personal care is personal. We have a way of doing it. And for some people, it could take an hour. Well, when you have a family member in here who's coming on their time and might have to rush and might have to go pick up kids from school, and you don't feel that your loved one doesn't feel like taking a shower at 3 o'clock, but that's all you have to give, what do you think's going to happen? Mom's going to say, I don't feel like showering right now. And you're like, you have to shower right now. This is all the time I have. Hurry up. That puts you into dynamic that gets uncomfortable for everybody. And I think as a caregiver, having been there, I have, as professional and as my grandma, have forced many shower times and guilty of it too. But
Mhm.
it will make people combative and it'll make them, it's hard to lose your autonomy in making your own decisions. And there's just going to always be a push-pull, especially when it comes to caring for family.
And then there's the I looked at some of your literature, and it's the parent might be a step parent and you don't love them as much. I hate saying it that way, but or other siblings aren't helping out and then you're angry all the time. So when you go over, it's like get in the shower, eat your dinner, and that's it. Yeah, I can see that happening. And then also that sense of you're not living a full life. Your life is passing by because this is the time in your life when you wanted to not work and not be burdened and you wanted to sleep late and, like you say, take an hour-long shower and go for a walk and take a class, and you can't because you have to always go check on mom or dad, and that's very, very discouraging for someone. Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, you're not just checking on mom or dad. And that's what mom or dad has to remember is most likely when you were caring for your children, the same children that are going to care for you, we did not have this sandwich generation in the same way we did prior. So you have to remember your adult child has to take care of their child and their family. It puts everyone in a tough place. And I see it from both sides. Um, and just being really respectful of it's a hard tightrope to walk on both ends of the partnership, the care partnership. But if you do have a plan in place and you can talk about it really early on prior to needing plan care, because once you need care, there is a dynamic shift. There's a conversation shift. Now it's defensive. Now it's not what if. When you can talk about it in the what ifs and your plans, and you can say, like, listen, mom, you might need care, and here's what I'm going to be able to give at that time. Mom's not going to be angry that you're not helping her because you don't need to help her then. But you can really say, like, this is if this is to happen in the next X amount of years, this is my schedule, this is what I have to give. So let's get my sister on the phone and see what she has to give. And then once we understand this, we'll understand where that difference lies and what we're going to have to subsidize. And we're talking about it now. And no one is angry, no one is upset, there's no resentment. That's what keeps families in place through this as well.
Also the unexpected. So you say to a parent who's in their 80s and they're very viable. We've talked about this as people in their 80s running marathons still, right? And all the way to sitting in the rocking chair and saying, I'm going to give up. And then there's people who truly can't. So your father's a marathon runner and he goes out for a run and he falls and he breaks his hip. Now you have somebody in a hospital bed in your dining room for an indefinite period of time. So that plan in place, I think the conversation has to be open to say it could happen when you're 65, it could happen when you're 95, but we need the plan in place because barring any unforeseen emergencies, this is what we have set. And then it could happen sooner rather than later or happen in ways very unexpected. Lindsay, how many times have you seen a couple where one of them is very, very sick and the other one passes away before the sick one?
A lot.
Yeah.
It's actually this one couple that I took care of. So this goes back many, many years. I will never forget them. He was a golf champ. She was very sick. He was not. He had gone out and played 18 holes of golf. He drove. He was in his mid 90s and he came back that afternoon. His wife couldn't go anywhere. She was in a wheelchair. She had MS. She had a lot of issues. And he came home that afternoon at assisted living. He didn't have
Oh,
help.
okay. Mm-hmm.
Came home after playing golf and he fell to the ground and he died. And I've got many examples of watching that where the one spouse ends up passing away first, be it stress, and it would be the person that you never would have thought of. I mean, I'm thinking women who, most of them in these cases that I'm thinking of, the man was in the better physical condition. The few couples that I watched, this literally, I was the one who had to walk in after it happened. And these were women who were absolutely devastated because these men, their husbands that had been with them for all of these years, were the ones helping them.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That it could happen without. So this is what the question is: is it cheaper to stay home with caregivers or send a parent somewhere that is equipped to handle the mounting needs of an older adult?
So I call that the tipping point. We actually on LTCare Nav have a tipping point calculator, which is different state by state, care level needs. And it is something really interesting to understand. And so we do have that ability to go in and say, how much care am I going to need at home? What's going to look like? What are those tasks look like? And where is that exact hour that assisted living becomes less expensive than home care?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the really interesting thing that people I think tend to forget about is when you say home care and you're like, oh, it's $8,000 a month, right? But you forget that that's also your room and your board and your care. So it doesn't take a lot for home care to become the more expensive option.
Got it. Got it. Mhm. That's interesting. Yes, you really have to sit down and evaluate it. Stop sticking your head in the sand, right? Is come out and just get a crystal clear picture before you need it. Like with anything else in life, preparation is better than luck, as they say. Lindsay, can you give us a quick kind of like 5-step evaluation list to determine if an older adult needs someone with them, all the time as opposed to just a daily check-in or a couple of days a week? What's the line of demarcation in which you really know that someone needs to be in the house with someone?
I think medication is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Is understanding, are they taking their medication the way they have to? Because there's a lot of obviously bad things can happen when you're not taking your medication. So that would be my number one. That does that mean they can live alone? Sure, but does that mean somebody has to be coming in and checking on it? Um, Bathing
Mm-hmm.
would be another one. Fall risk. Are they spending more time? Are you getting more and more calls about them falling?
Mm-hmm.
And can they get up on their own? Those would be the ones that I really look at. It's interesting because they're used not being able to drive plays, I think, into loneliness. Now, is your older adult able to call an Uber and get around? Do you live in a community that's like that? Then I don't think it matters as much. Something new that we haven't had in many other older adult situations. But that would be the other one is, are they alone? Are they no longer socializing?
So, but there's also an element, as you know, of depression that an older adult might be perfectly capable of taking their medication or perfectly capable of showering or even capable of going out and going for a walk. But they're so sad or depressed or lonely about their circumstances that they do stop taking care of themselves. And I think that is hard. So you go in and you're like yelling at your parent, why didn't you take a shower? Or why didn't you put your dishes away? Or why didn't you? I didn't feel like it. So there really isn't anything. It's not that they can't do it, they won't.
Depression and loneliness can be debilitating.
Yes, 100%.
And so if you're at that point, that is, like I said, it's one of the things that
Mm-hmm.
you look at. And even if the lack of showering is caused because of the depression, handling that it could just be the cause of fact, but whatever that, there's really good reason to not let people get lonely.
Is there enough people in this world doing this type of work? I know that when my father later on, he wanted a male nurse. He said, I don't want the girls in here while I'm taking a shower. So we got him a male nurse. Are there enough people out there doing this? Is the demand going to be met in the next 10 to 15 years at least?
My guess is no.
Yeah.
Um, no, people are aging faster
Hmm.
than we have people to cover them.
Right.
And so care is going to become even more expensive
Hmm.
because of the shortage. So the answer is no. What's going to happen with that? I'm not sure. Um, done some chatting with people about what does robotics look like. And I think there's gonna end up being a time and place for it, as much as I don't love that idea. But I'm hoping it sticks with things that don't require a human connection. I hope it's like toileting, because there's also some dignity having
Right.
something help you toilet versus someone.
Right.
But I hope we never lose the compassion of another human rolling a wheelchair down the hallway and saying, "How was your day? How did you enjoy dinner, Mrs. Smith? How are you feeling?" Because a robot is never gonna be able to do that in the same way a human can.
Yeah. So that's why it gets back to this roommating, being around people, being engaged, exercising, eating healthy, like everything we do to prevent or keep the decline at a minimum as we get older. Lindsay Friedman, I can't thank you enough for being here and sharing this unbelievable information. Bottomless pit, there's so much more to talk about, which we will. And in terms of reaching out to Lindsay Friedman and her services, you can find her at www.itcarenav.com, and we'll post it up when the show's up. And in closing, Lindsay, I want to ask you, what do you like about getting older?
What am I? There's actually a lot I like. There's a few things I don't like. Definitely not gonna deny. There's changes that I'm seeing why it becomes challenging. I don't know. I'm finding that I can just be so much more myself and embrace things that moments that I never thought I would be able to.
That's wonderful to hear. And keep at it. I think what you're doing is amazing. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us here at It's Okay to Be Old. And for more information about me and the show, you can reach out at www.patriciagreenberg.com. Thanks again and stay well and stay safe.